I didn't find out my husband was hiding 6 figures of debt because he confessed, or because I snooped through his phone like a movie. I found out because a process server knocked on my door at 7:12 a.m. on a Wednesday while my coffee was still too hot to drink, and my son was still upstairs brushing his teeth. He didn't ask if this was a good time. He didn't soften his voice. He just looked at my face, checked a clipboard, and said, "Megan Reed?" I nodded, confused. "I have documents for you," he said, and before I could even ask what kind, he added, "You've been served." My heart did something sharp and fast, like it hit a wall inside my chest. He held out a thick envelope. Across the front, in bold caps, it said, "Summons and complaint." And beneath that, a number so large my brain tried to reject it. $186,417.29. I blinked. I read it again. Then I felt the floor tilt, because the name next to that number wasn't mine. It was ours. Megan Reed and Ethan Reed, defendants. Not Ethan, not my husband, both of us. I stood in my doorway in a robe, barefoot, holding a lawsuit that claimed I owed almost $200,000, and I couldn't hear anything except the blood rushing in my ears. "Ma'am," the process server said, already stepping back, "you'll want to read that. You have 21 days. Then he walked away like he hadn't just dropped a bomb into my life. I shut the door slowly, quietly, the way you do when your hands aren't obeying you. My son called from upstairs. "Mom, where's my backpack?" "On the chair," I said automatically. My voice sounded normal. My body didn't. I carried the envelope to the kitchen, set it on the counter, stared at it like it might move on its own, then finally opened it with trembling fingers. It was a complaint from a lender I'd never heard of. A business line of credit, allegedly opened 18 months earlier, a personal guarantee, and a default. The word punched through every other detail. There were dates, payment histories, a final demand letter, and then the part that made my throat close, a signature page, my name, my signature, next to Ethan's. My knees went weak, because the signature looked like mine. It had my loops, my slant, even my little habit of lifting the pen too early at the end. But I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't been in an office. I hadn't sat across from a banker. I hadn't agreed to guarantee anyone's business. I hadn't even known Ethan had a business line of credit. He told me his side projects were small. He told me everything was fine. He told me I didn't need to worry, because worrying was my thing, not his. And now I was holding proof that the world disagreed. I heard the garage door open, Ethan's car. He had left early to meet a client, which was normal, because he always had meetings, always had calls, always had something that made him sound important. My hands went cold. He walked in with that casual energy he wore like armor. Jacket over one arm, phone in his hand, already smiling at something on the screen. "Hey," he said, "you up early?" I didn't answer. He looked up finally, saw the paper spread across the counter, saw my face. His smile stalled. "What's that?" he asked. I held up the first page. "We got sued," I said, and the words tasted unreal. His eyes flicked across the document too fast. Then he did something that made my stomach drop even further. He didn't look confused. He looked irritated, like this was an inconvenience. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "My front door," I said. "A process server." He exhaled sharply, rubbed his forehead. "Okay, don't panic. Don't panic," my voice cracked. Ethan, it says we owe $186,000. He stepped closer, lowered his voice like our son might be listening through the walls. It's a business thing. It's not personal. My name is on it, I said. He held up his hands. They put spouses on things sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. I stared at him, waiting for the part where he would explain, apologize, admit he messed up. Instead, he reached for the papers like he wanted to take them away from me. I pulled them back. When? I asked. He blinked. When what? When did you do this? My heart hammered. When did you open a line of credit and sign my name? His jaw tightened. I didn't sign your name. Then how is my signature on the guarantee? I asked, and my voice was suddenly too loud for my own kitchen. Ethan leaned in, eyes hard. Lower your voice, he snapped. That was the moment, not the lawsuit, not the number. That moment when he cared more about the volume of my shock than the reason for it. I lowered my voice anyway, because habit is powerful, and because my son was still upstairs. But my mind didn't lower. It sharpened. Ethan, I said slowly, did you sign my name? He didn't answer right away. He stared at the counter, like he was calculating. Then he said, very quietly, it was paperwork. It was temporary. I was going to fix it. My chest tightened. So yes. He looked up. I didn't think it would come to this, he said. I felt something crack inside me. Not just trust. Something deeper. You forged my signature, I whispered. He shrugged like he was talking about a parking ticket. I had to. The bank wouldn't move fast enough, and the opportunity was time-sensitive. Opportunity. I stared at him. You put me in a lawsuit, I said. You put our house at risk, our future. Ethan's voice turned sharp. Stop being dramatic. No one is taking the house. But in my gut, I already knew that wasn't true. Because debts don't care how calm you sound. Debts care what you signed and what the court believes. That was the legal and financial anchor of everything that followed. And it landed within the first minute of that process, server handing me that envelope. A lawsuit. A forged guarantee. 6 figures. My name. And the terrifying realization that the person sleeping beside me for 9 years had been building a second life out of numbers and lies. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a glass. I did something quieter. I picked up my phone, and I started taking pictures of every page. Ethan noticed and stepped forward. What are you doing? Making sure you don't lose it, I said. He froze. Then he tried a softer voice. Meg, listen, I can explain. Explain like you explained last year when you said your credit card was just for points, I asked. Explain like you explained when you said you'd pay off the balance next month. His eyes narrowed. You went through my statements. You asked me to handle the mail, I said. I handled it. Ethan's face flushed. That was minor. Minor? I held up the complaint. This is not minor. He shook his head like I was the unreasonable one. It's business, he insisted. Sometimes you float. Sometimes you leverage. It's normal. Normal. I looked around our kitchen, the family photos on the fridge, our son's drawing taped crookedly to the cabinet, the grocery list on the counter. Nothing about this felt normal. I forced my voice steady. How much? I asked. He blinked. How much what? How much debt are you hiding? I said, because I don't believe this is the only one. Ethan hesitated, and that hesitation, that tiny pause, told me everything. Ethan, I said, how much? He sighed and finally said, I don't know. It changes. My stomach lurched. That's not an answer. He snapped. Because you wouldn't understand it. The insult was automatic, like muscle memory. He had said versions of that for years, whenever money came up, whenever I asked a question that threatened his image. And I had swallowed it, because marriage is 1,000 small compromises, and I thought keeping peace was a kind of love. But peace built on ignorance isn't peace. It's control. I took a slow breath. We're calling a lawyer, I said. Ethan's head jerked up. No. Yes, I said. He stepped closer, voice low. You do not call a lawyer, he warned. You'll blow this up and make it worse. I stared at him. Worse than being sued for $200,000? He leaned in. I said I'll fix it. By when? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. Ethan grabbed his phone. I have a meeting, he said, suddenly rushing, like escaping would make reality stop chasing him. We'll talk tonight. You're not leaving, I said. He paused in the hallway, eyes cold. I'm leaving, he said, and you're going to calm down. He walked out. The garage door closed, and I stood there alone, realizing something that made my hands shake even more than the lawsuit. If Ethan could forge my signature on a guarantee, he could forge it on anything. A loan, a deed, a credit application, my identity, my life. I went upstairs and smiled at my son like everything was fine, packed his lunch, tied his shoes, dropped him off at school. The whole time, my brain kept repeating the number like a chant. $186,417.29. When I got home, I didn't sit down. I opened every drawer where we kept important documents. I pulled out our tax returns. I pulled out our mortgage statement. I pulled out the folder labeled insurance. Then I went to the file cabinet Ethan always told me was messy and not worth sorting, and I started sorting it anyway. The first hour, I found nothing, just old receipts and expired warranties. Then I found a stack of envelopes, unopened, shoved behind a folder like someone had hidden them on purpose. Final notice, past due, intent to refer. I stared at them and felt my mouth go dry. I opened the first one, a credit card in Ethan's name. Balance, $32,814. Minimum payment overdue. I opened another, a different credit card. Balance, $27,102. I opened another, a loan statement from a company I'd never seen. Balance, $48,900. And then, a letter that made my stomach twist into a knot. A notice of lien filing, UCC1 financing statement, filed against Ethan Reed and Megan Reed, debtor, my name again. This wasn't one debt. This was a web. I called my friend Danielle, who worked in accounting, because my hands were shaking too hard to hold the phone still. Danielle, I said, forcing my voice calm, I need you to tell me something. If my spouse signs my name on a guarantee, am I responsible? There was a pause. Did you sign it? She asked. No, I said. Then it's fraud, she said, voice firm. But you have to prove it, and you have to act fast. Act fast. That phrase lit something in me. I didn't want to be reactive. I wanted to be strategic. I opened my laptop and pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. When the page loaded, my breath caught. Accounts I didn't recognize. Inquiries I didn't remember. A personal loan opened 12 months ago. A retail card opened 9 months ago. Another line of credit. Another. The total wasn't just 6 figures. It was more. It was everything Ethan had been siphoning. While I thought we were fine, I scrolled to the bottom and saw the thing that made my vision blur. A delinquency, linked to our mortgage, not the main mortgage, but a second lien, a HELOC. Balance, $92,000. My heart slammed. A home equity line of credit meant the house was collateral. It meant the house was not just at risk. It was the target. I grabbed our mortgage paperwork from the drawer and searched for any reference to a HELOC. Nothing. I searched the file cabinet again, more aggressively now, and there it was. A thin packet inside a manila envelope labeled Project Reno in Ethan's handwriting. Project Reno, like it was a kitchen upgrade. Inside was a HELOC agreement with my name as co-borrower and my signature. Again, a perfect imitation. I stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I did the first thing Marcus Dyer, my future attorney, would later tell me saved my case. I documented. I photographed every page. I scanned every signature page. I wrote down every account number. I started a timeline on a legal pad with dates and amounts and every piece of mail I could find. Because somewhere deep inside, past the panic, I understood something. The truth was going to need structure. The truth was going to need receipts. When Ethan came home that night, I didn't confront him the way a movie would. I didn't slam the papers on the table. I sat on the couch with the documents neatly stacked in front of me, like I was preparing a presentation. He walked in, loosened his tie, saw the stack, and his face tightened. "What's this?" he asked. I held up the HELOC packet. "You took out a home equity line of credit," I said, "and you forged my signature." Ethan's eyes flicked over it. "That was for the business," he said quickly. "Temporary." "Temporary doesn't mean legal," I said. He scoffed. "You're overreacting." I slid the credit card statements forward. 32,000, I said. 27,000, 48,000, and a lawsuit for 186. That's already over $290,000. Ethan's jaw clenched. "It's not like that." I pushed the credit report forward. "It is exactly like that," I said. He stared at the paper, then looked up like he was offended by my competence. "You pulled my credit?" he asked. "I pulled mine," I said, "because you dragged my name into this." Ethan's voice turned hard. "You had no right." I stared at him. "No right?" I echoed. "You forged my signature. You opened debt in my name. You put our home at risk. And you're telling me I have no right to know?" He stood there, breathing heavier, eyes darting, calculating again. Then he did what he always did when cornered. He attacked my character. "You're paranoid," he said. "You've always been paranoid about money." I felt my throat tighten, but my voice stayed steady. "No," I said. "I've always been responsible." He laughed once, sharp. "Responsible?" he snapped. "You're a teacher, Megan. You don't understand leverage. You don't understand growth." "You know what I understand?" I said quietly. "I understand you lied, and I understand we're being sued." Ethan rolled his eyes. "The lawsuit is negotiation. It's pressure. It's not real." "It is real," I said, "because a court doesn't file negotiation. A court files a case." He stared at me, then finally said the thing he thought would end the conversation. "I'll handle it," he said. I leaned forward. "How?" I asked. He hesitated. Then he said, "I'm working on a deal." "A deal with who?" I asked. He opened his mouth, then shut it. I nodded. You don't have a plan, I said. He stepped toward me. Stop talking to me like I'm some criminal, he said through his teeth. I looked up at him and felt something settle in my bones. You are, I said softly. Ethan froze. The silence stretched, thick and dangerous. Then he spoke in a calm voice that felt like a threat wearing a suit. If you go to a lawyer, he said, I will make this ugly. My skin went cold. Ugly how? His eyes narrowed. You want to blow up our family? Fine. But don't think you'll walk away with everything. Everything. He meant the house. He meant custody. He meant my reputation. He meant whatever he thought he still controlled. I stood up slowly, heart pounding, and I said, I'm not afraid of ugly anymore. Ethan's face twisted. You should be, he said. That night after he went to bed like nothing had happened, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and my hands shaking. And I searched for a family law attorney who understood financial fraud. By morning, I had an appointment. Her name was Priya Shah. She had sharp eyes and a voice that didn't waste time. I slid the lawsuit across her desk and watched her read the first page. Then I slid the HELOC packet. Then the credit report. She didn't gasp. She didn't dramatize it. She just looked up and said, Your husband committed fraud. And if your name is on these accounts, creditors will try to treat you like you benefited. We have to separate you from his actions immediately. I swallowed. How? Priya ticked off steps like she was reading from a checklist she'd built for exactly this kind of nightmare. Freeze your credit today, she said. File a police report for identity theft and forgery. Notify each creditor in writing that you dispute the debt. And we file for divorce with emergency financial restraining orders to stop him from creating more debt, selling assets, moving money. Divorce. The word landed heavy, but it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a boundary. Priya continued. We also need to protect the house, she said. We'll pull the county records, see if there are liens, and if your signatures were forged, we may file to set aside any fraudulent encumbrances. But you have to stop trusting his promises. I exhaled shakily. I'm not trusting anything anymore, I said. Priya nodded once. Good. Within 48 hours, I had a police report number. Filing it felt surreal, sitting in a precinct office, explaining to a stranger that my husband had forged my name, like I was telling a story that belonged to someone else. The officer asked, Are you sure it wasn't authorized? I looked him in the eye. If I didn't sign, I said, voice firm, it wasn't authorized. He nodded and typed. When I left, I felt both exposed and strangely stronger. Because now, my reality existed in a report, not just in my head. Priya filed for divorce the next day. She requested temporary orders, exclusive use of the home, an injunction preventing Ethan from taking on new debt in my name, and immediate disclosure of all financial accounts. Ethan was served at his office. He called me the moment it happened. What did you do? He hissed. I protected myself, I said. You humiliated me, he snapped. You humiliated me when you forged my signature, I said. His voice turned icy. You have no idea what you just started. I know exactly what I started, I replied. The truth. He laughed, low and bitter. You think a judge cares about your feelings? You think the court is going to save you? Megan, the court cares about contracts, and your name is on those contracts. My stomach clenched, but Priya's voice echoed in my head. Act fast. Document. Separate. I said, We'll see what the court cares about, and I hung up. Then the escalation started coming like waves. Every few days, something new, something uglier, something that felt designed to exhaust me into surrender. First, a bank letter. Not about Ethan's business, about our joint checking. Account frozen due to legal process. I called the bank, panic rising. A representative told me we received a levy request related to a judgment. A judgment. My throat tightened. What judgment? We were just served. The rep paused. Ma'am, there's an older matter connected to Mr. Reed. It's attached to the joint account. Older matter. Meaning Ethan had been sued before and never told me. I drove to the bank with my ID and the police report in my purse like a shield. They couldn't release the funds until the legal department reviewed my dispute. My debit card stopped working that afternoon. I stood at the grocery store checkout with a cart full of food and a card that declined. While people behind me sighed, my cheeks burned with humiliation. I paid with a credit card, one of my own, and I left the store shaking. The next escalation hit at school. My son's aftercare program called to say the payment didn't go through. I logged in and saw the tuition account flagged for delinquency, not because I didn't pay, because the account used to auto-pay from our joint checking, the frozen account. Ethan's debt was now reaching into my child's routine. That night, I opened a new bank account in my name only. I rerouted my paycheck. I changed passwords. I turned off any auto-pay connected to anything Ethan touched. Ethan noticed within a week. He stormed into the kitchen, waving his phone. Why did my card stop working? He demanded. I looked up calmly. Because I separated my finances, I said. You can't drain what you can't access. His eyes widened. Drain? He scoffed. I'm your husband. You forged my signature, I replied. You're also my liability. He slammed his hand on the counter. You're trying to ruin me, he said. I didn't flinch. You ruined you, I said. For a second, he looked like he might throw something. Then he did something worse. He smiled, slow, cold. You think you're smart, he said. You think you're in control, but you don't know the whole picture. My stomach tightened. What picture? He leaned in. If you push this, he whispered, those creditors will come after the house. They'll come after your paycheck. They'll come after you. I stared at him. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you signed my name. Ethan's smile vanished. You don't get it, he snapped. I did what I had to do. To what? I demanded. To impress people? To pretend you were successful? His face flushed. To build something, he said. For us. For us? I laughed once, bitter. You didn't even tell me it existed. He stared at me like he wanted to argue. But he couldn't. Because lies don't like daylight. The discovery process forced him into it anyway. Priya filed formal requests for production. Bank statements, loan documents, business records, tax returns, credit applications. Ethan responded with delays, partial disclosures, excuses. Then the judge ordered compliance. 2 weeks later, boxes arrived at Priya's office. I sat across from her while she opened them. And that's when the debt became more than a number. It became a timeline. There were cash advances taken out at casinos, thousands at a time. There were wire transfers to an account labeled RC Ventures. There were payments to a luxury car lease I'd never seen, registered under Ethan's name, parked God knows where. There were invoices from a marketing firm, tens of thousands, for a brand launch. And there were emails between Ethan and a private lender, talking about rolling old debt into new paper, like he was shuffling cards. My throat tightened. How long? I whispered. Priya flipped through a statement and said, at least 3 years, 3 years, while I clipped coupons, while I planned our son's birthday parties, while I trusted the calm tone Ethan used whenever I asked, "Are we okay?" We weren't okay. We were sinking, and he was still ordering champagne. The next escalation came in the mail. A notice from the IRS. Not a full audit, a CP notice, stating there was a discrepancy on our joint return, unreported income. My hands went numb. I called Priya in a panic. She said, "This is serious, but it's also common when someone is hiding side income or business activity. We may need a tax attorney, and we may need to consider innocent spouse relief." Innocent spouse relief. The phrase sounded like something you'd say about a scandalous celebrity. Not about me, but Priya explained quickly. If you filed joint returns, the IRS can hold both spouses liable, she said. Innocent spouse relief is a way to argue you didn't know and shouldn't be held responsible. My stomach twisted, but how do I prove I didn't know? By showing you weren't involved, she said. No access, no benefit, no control, and by showing he actively concealed. Actively concealed. Like hiding unopened envelopes behind folders, like forging signatures, like smiling while he did it. I hired a tax attorney named Victor Lane, a calm man with glasses and a voice that made chaos feel manageable. He reviewed everything and said, "We build a case that you were deceived," he said, "and we separate your financial life from his as fast as possible." Then he added, "Also, stop signing anything your husband puts in front of you. Not even a school form if he hands it over." I swallowed. "I'm not signing anything," I said. He nodded. "Good." Ethan, meanwhile, started a different tactic. Charm. He brought home flowers. He cooked dinner. He spoke softly. "I've been under pressure," he said one night, sitting at the table like a man rehearsing sincerity. "I didn't want to burden you." I stared at him. "You didn't want to burden me," I repeated. "So you burdened me with a lawsuit." His eyes flashed. "I'm trying to fix it," he said. "I don't believe you," I replied. He leaned forward. "Megan, please," he said, voice smooth. "If we can settle with the lender, if we can restructure, we can keep the house. We can keep things stable for our son." I felt my throat tighten for a moment because he knew exactly where to aim. Our son. Stability. The part of me that still wanted a normal story. But then I remembered the HELOC, the forged signature, the frozen bank account, and I realized something. Ethan wasn't pleading for our family. He was pleading for his access to my name. "I'm filing for exclusive use of the house," I said calmly, "and you're moving out." Ethan's face went blank. "You can't make me." Priya already had a plan. We requested a temporary order granting me exclusive occupancy, citing financial fraud, intimidation, and risk of further harm. At the hearing, Ethan showed up in a suit, calm and confident, playing the role he always played. Reasonable husband, emotional wife. He told the judge I was overreacting and confused. Priya didn't argue feelings. She argued evidence. She submitted the police report, the forged signature pages, the lawsuit naming me as a defendant, the HELOC documents, the credit report, the bank levy. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Mr. Reed," she said, "did you sign your wife's name on these documents?" Ethan hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Then he said, "She authorized me." Priya's voice stayed calm. "Your Honor," she said, "authorization does not involve forging a signature. If she authorized him, why is there a police report for identity theft? Why is she disputing the debts in writing? Why is there a lender complaint attached to her name?" The judge stared at Ethan. Ethan's jaw tightened. The judge granted temporary orders, exclusive occupancy to me, Ethan to move out within 10 days, no new debt in either name, full financial disclosure required. Ethan walked past me in the hallway afterward and whispered, "You just made an enemy." I looked at him and said, "You've been my enemy for years. I just didn't know it." He moved out on day 9. Not because he respected the order, but because he didn't want to be forcibly removed. He took his clothes, his laptop, and 2 boxes labeled business. He left behind the debt, like it was trash he expected me to carry out. The escalations didn't stop. Creditors started calling. Some were polite, some were aggressive. One called my work line and left a voicemail that made my hands shake. "Ms. Reed, this is an attempt to collect a debt." My principal asked if everything was okay. I lied and said yes. Then I went to my classroom, closed the door, and sat at my desk with tears threatening. I was a teacher. I was the reliable one, the organized one, the one other people leaned on. And now my life felt like a spreadsheet Ethan had corrupted. Cells filled with numbers I didn't choose. Priya told me, "We're going to send cease and desist notices," she said, "and we're going to notify them you dispute the debts due to fraud. But some will still try to pressure you." Pressure was exactly what Ethan counted on, because if I broke, he could offer a solution, and he did. He called me one evening, voice gentle. "I can make it stop," he said. I didn't speak. "I have an investor," he continued. "They'll cover the lender. But we need to refinance the house." My stomach dropped. "No." "It's temporary," he said quickly, "just to consolidate. One payment, clean slate." I said no, I repeated. Ethan's voice hardened. "Megan, you're going to lose everything if you don't listen." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Then why are you still trying to use the house as collateral?" I asked. "Because you already did." Silence. Then softly he said, "You don't understand how close we are to a breakthrough." Breakthrough. A word he used like a magic spell. I realized in that moment, Ethan's whole life was built on the promise of a future that never arrived, and he expected me to keep funding the promise. "I'm not refinancing," I said. Ethan exhaled sharply. "Fine," he snapped. "Then I'll do it another way." The line went dead. 2 days later, I got the letter that changed everything again. Notice of intent to accelerate. The HELOC lender. Because Ethan had stopped making payments, they were moving toward foreclosure, on my house. My breath left my body. I called Victor, the tax attorney, then Priya. Priya said, "We file for an emergency injunction," she said, "and we contact the lender's fraud department with your police report and the forged signature evidence." Victor said, "This is also evidence of concealment," he said. "It strengthens innocent spouse relief. But right now, we protect the property." Protect the property. My hands shook as I emailed the lender's fraud team. Police report attached. Forensic handwriting request pending. Divorce case number. Temporary orders. Everything. Within 24 hours, a fraud investigator called me. Her voice was calm. "Ms. Reed," she said, "we've received your dispute. We are placing a temporary hold on foreclosure activity while we investigate." Hold? A tiny word that felt like oxygen. But the hold didn't erase the fear. Because I knew Ethan had more tricks. And at around the point where I thought I'd already seen the worst, the twist arrived. Not from a creditor. Not from the court. From a banker's office downtown, where I went to pull the official title report on my house. I wanted to know exactly what was recorded, what liens existed, what Ethan had attached to my home without my knowledge. The title officer, a woman named Karen, printed the report and slid it across the desk. "There are 2 mortgages," she said. "Your primary and the HELOC." I nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "And there's also a recorded deed of trust from a private lender." My stomach dropped. "What?" She pointed to a line on the report. "Deed of trust, RC Ventures, $150,000, recorded 8 months ago. Borrower, Ethan Reed and Megan Reed." My vision blurred. "That's not possible," I whispered. "I never—" Karen's eyes were sympathetic. "It's recorded," she said gently. "If it's fraudulent, your attorney will need to challenge it, but it's there." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, because that meant Ethan hadn't just borrowed against our house once. He'd stacked liens, layered debt, turned my home into collateral for his secret life. Over and over, like the house was a credit card he could swipe forever. And then Karen said the sentence that turned my fear into clarity. "Also," she said, "the private lender's documents include a spousal consent clause and an occupancy waiver. It's unusual." Occupancy waiver. My heart slammed. "What does that mean?" Karen took a breath. "It means if the lender forecloses, the occupant agrees to vacate without contesting possession." My mouth went dry. It wasn't just debt. It was a legal trap. Ethan wasn't merely hiding numbers. He was building a pathway to remove me from my home. Quickly, legally, using paperwork he forced into existence with my forged signature. I stared at the title report and felt something inside me go still. Because now I understood the shape of the whole scheme. Ethan didn't just want money. He wanted leverage. He wanted a way to corner me, to say, "Sign this, or you lose the house." He wanted power. And he used my name as the weapon. I left the title office and sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Then I did the most important thing I'd done in months. I stopped reacting, and I started planning the counterstrike. Priya filed immediately, not just in family court, but in civil court. A petition to set aside fraudulent encumbrances. A request for a temporary restraining order, preventing any foreclosure sale pending the fraud determination. A notice of pending action. A lis pendens. Recorded against the property so no lender could pretend they didn't know a dispute existed. Victor prepared innocent spouse relief paperwork with evidence of concealment. And Priya did something else. She referred the forged deeds of trust and guarantees to the district attorney's office with a packet so organized it looked like a case file from a detective show. Every signature page, every date, every recorded document, every timeline entry, every creditor letter. Because when fraud becomes systemic, it stops being marital conflict. It becomes criminal. Ethan didn't know that yet. He still thought he could negotiate. He showed up at my house one afternoon, violating the temporary orders by coming to the property, standing on the curb like he owned the street. I stayed inside and spoke through the door camera. "You need to leave," I said. He smiled at the camera. "We need to talk," he said. "This has gotten out of control." "You got it out of control," I replied. Ethan's smile faltered. "Megan, I'm offering you a solution," he said. "I can settle with RC Ventures. I can restructure, but you have to cooperate." "Cooperate how?" I asked, already knowing. He hesitated, then said, "You need to sign a stipulation in the divorce, acknowledging the debts as marital." Marital. There it was. He wanted the court to stamp his lies into shared responsibility. I felt my stomach tighten, then release, like something in me finally snapped free. "No," I said calmly, "and you should leave before I call the police." Ethan's face hardened. "You wouldn't," he snapped. I paused, then said, "Try me." I watched his eyes flick to the camera, to the house, to the street. He realized there were witnesses now. He turned and walked away, but his shoulders were rigid with anger. 2 weeks later, the DA called Priya. They were opening an investigation. They wanted an interview with me. They wanted the original documents. They wanted my known signature samples. When I sat in that interview room, answering questions, I felt strangely calm. Because for once, I wasn't trying to convince Ethan of the truth. I was placing the truth into a system built to measure it. Meanwhile, the lenders began responding. The HELOC fraud team requested verification. They asked for my ID, my signature samples, my police report. RC Ventures, whatever it truly was, sent a threatening letter through a law firm claiming I was attempting to evade contractual obligations. Priya responded with one sentence that felt like a blade. "Ms. Reed did not execute these instruments. Any attempt to enforce them will be met with claims for fraud, slander of title, and attorney's fees." Slander of title, attorney's fees, words that made bullies pause. Then came the big turning point, the one Ethan never saw coming, because Ethan assumed the private lender was a faceless entity that would protect him, because it benefited. But when Priya subpoenaed RC Ventures records, they cracked. They weren't a real venture firm. They were a shell, a company created by Ethan's business partner, a man named Caleb Marsh, who had been lending Ethan money off the books, secured by my house, based on forged documents. And when Caleb realized there was a criminal investigation, he panicked. He hired his own attorney. He offered cooperation. He turned over emails, texts, wire records, and the detail that made my blood run cold. Ethan had been planning to file bankruptcy and use the stacked liens to argue I had to sell the house to satisfy creditors, then offer me a settlement where I walked away with almost nothing. He wasn't just drowning. He was steering the ship and making sure I went down first. When Priya told me, I felt like I'd been punched. Then I felt something else. Clarity. Because now the story wasn't my husband made mistakes. It was my husband engineered a trap. And engineered traps can be dismantled, piece by piece, if you have proof. We had proof. Emails where Ethan said, "She won't notice. She never reads these." Texts where he told Caleb, "Just send it to my office. I'll handle the signature pages." Wire records showing loan proceeds going to Ethan's accounts, not to the house. A pattern, a plan. Priya filed the civil case aggressively. She requested summary relief to void the fraudulent deed of trust. She requested sanctions. She requested attorney's fees. And she petitioned family court for a disproportionate division of assets due to fraud, plus a finding that any debt Ethan incurred through deception should be assigned to him alone. Ethan, finally feeling the ground shift, tried his last big move. He filed for bankruptcy. Chapter 7, Automatic Stay. He thought it would freeze everything. He thought it would protect him. But bankruptcy has a rule Ethan couldn't charm his way around. Fraud doesn't discharge cleanly. Victor and Priya filed an adversary proceeding in bankruptcy court, alleging fraud, willful injury, forged instruments, and requesting non-dischargeability. They also asked the bankruptcy judge for relief from stay, so the civil court could determine title and void the liens. At the first bankruptcy hearing, Ethan sat at the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Still in a suit, still trying to look composed. But his eyes kept flicking around the courtroom, like he was searching for an exit. The judge, an older man with a flat voice, asked, "Mr. Reed, did you sign your wife's name on financial instruments?" Ethan hesitated. Then he did what he always did. He lied. "No," he said. Priya stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we have emails from Mr. Reed describing the forging of his wife's signature, along with recorded deeds of trust bearing simulated signatures and a police report. We also have a cooperating witness from RC Ventures." Ethan's face drained of color. The judge leaned forward. "A cooperating witness," he repeated. Priya nodded. Ethan's attorney began to speak. The judge lifted a hand. "No," he said. "Not yet. I want to hear from the trustee." The bankruptcy trustee, a woman with sharp eyes, spoke calmly. "There are undisclosed assets," she said. "There are questionable transfers, and there are allegations of fraud." The judge looked at Ethan. "Mr. Reed," he said, "bankruptcy is not a safe harbor for deception. If these allegations are substantiated, you could face denial of discharge and referral." Referral. That word landed like a hammer. Ethan swallowed. For the first time, he looked truly afraid. Because this wasn't me. This wasn't marriage. This was a system that didn't care how charming he sounded. The judge granted limited relief from stay for the lien dispute. The civil case could proceed. The adversary proceeding would continue. And the trustee began investigating Ethan's transfers. The next escalation didn't hit me. It hit Ethan. His bank accounts were frozen pending trustee review. His business partner cut ties. His car lease was repossessed. And then, one morning, Priya called me and said, "The DA issued charges. Charges, forgery, identity theft, filing a false instrument, and because of the scope, because of the number of documents, because of the amount, it wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was serious." Ethan called me that night. His voice was not confident now. It was thin. "Megan," he said, "you have to help me." I didn't answer immediately. I just listened to him breathe. He tried again. "Please," he said. "Tell them you authorized it. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I was trying to provide." I felt my throat tighten, not with sympathy, with disbelief. "You want me to lie," I said quietly. He whispered, "Just this once." Just this once. The phrase was almost funny, because his entire life had been just this once, over and over, stacked like the liens on my house. "No," I said. His voice cracked. "Megan, I could go to jail." I closed my eyes, and then I said the sentence that felt like stepping out of a shadow. "You should have thought of that before you made me the collateral," I said. Ethan made a sound, half sob, half anger. Then the line went dead. Over the next month, the power shifted in ways I could actually feel. The HELOC lender formally recognized the dispute and agreed not to pursue foreclosure while the fraud case moved. RC Ventures, facing liability, filed a release, agreeing to unwind the deed of trust in exchange for not being targeted further once they cooperated. The county recorder's office recorded a court order voiding the fraudulent lien and clearing the title. My house, my actual home, began to look clean on paper again. In family court, Priya presented the pattern of fraud, the criminal charges, and the civil relief. The judge issued final orders that assigned Ethan's fraudulent debts to him, alone, granted me the house, and ordered Ethan to pay a portion of my legal fees. fees he had created with his lies. Victor filed innocent spouse relief, attaching the criminal case, the forged signatures, and the court findings. Months later, a letter arrived from the IRS. Relief granted. I stared at that letter for a long time, then let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. Ethan's bankruptcy ended the way he never expected. Discharge denied, fraud allegations substantiated, trustee referrals made. He didn't walk away clean. He walked away exposed. And then came the day that proved the shift was real. The day Ethan finally realized he couldn't twist the story anymore. It happened at a courthouse hallway, after a hearing where the judge confirmed the lien releases and the title order. Ethan stood near the wall in a wrinkled suit, hair slightly unkempt, eyes hollow with sleep deprivation. He watched me walk out with Priya, calm, composed, holding a folder so neat it looked like a shield. He stepped forward, like habit made him try one last time. "Megan," he said, voice low, "we can still fix this." Priya didn't speak. She let me decide. I looked at Ethan. Really looked. And I saw what I'd missed for years. Not genius, not ambition. Fear, dressed up as confidence. A man who would rather gamble everything than admit he wasn't enough. "We are fixed," I said quietly. "Just not together." His face twisted. "You think you won?" he hissed. I nodded once. "I did," I said, "because I stopped carrying your lies." He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, because there was nothing left to threaten. No house leverage, no shared accounts, no legal fog, no signature pages he could slide across a table. The system had receipts now, and the receipts didn't care about his tone. Ethan's shoulders sagged. He whispered, almost to himself, "I was trying to build something." I said, "You built debt," and then I turned away. Outside, the air felt sharper, cleaner, like the world had edges again. I drove home to a house that was finally mine, on paper and in peace. I walked through the front door and saw my son at the kitchen table doing homework. "Mom," he said, "can we have pizza tonight?" I smiled, genuine. "Yeah," I said, "we can." Later that night, after he went to bed, I sat on the couch and opened my folder one more time. Police report, lien release, court orders, IRS relief, bank letters, everything organized, everything dated, everything real. And I realized the biggest twist wasn't that Ethan had hidden 6 figures of debt. The biggest twist was that he had hidden it while making me feel like I was the one who didn't understand. Like I was the one who worried too much. Like I was the one who needed to be calmed down. And the power reversal wasn't just legal. It wasn't just getting the house protected, the liens cleared, the debts assigned, the discharge denied. It was this. I stopped being the woman who waited for him to tell the truth. I became the woman who proved it. And once the truth is documented, once it's filed, once it's stamped and recorded, a liar can't talk his way back into control. He can only watch as the world finally stops rearranging itself for him and starts rearranging itself for you.